How to find your guiding star. What do I mean by that? When it comes to writing an essay on a short story or any piece of literature, the first question is, what do I write about? Some students make the mistake of writing a review of the text. I liked the story very much, the author sure knows how to tell a good story, the characters were believable. Wrong, don't do that. So what should you write about? Well, you need a focal point. You need an idea that resonates with you. You need a guiding star. There are so many things you could write about. Let me show you the possibilities. Let me show you a whole new world. First, let's imagine you're writing about Rope Carrier's story, A Secret Lost in the Water. There's a link to this story in the description below. I recommend you read it. It's only 2 pages, won't take you long. You could write about, regarding this story, several key themes like education, passing down knowledge, or loss. If you wrote about education, you might break it down into the following 3 points. First, the son's education, his obsession with spelling, his intellectual nature, and the fact that he does most of his learning at school. Our second point might relate to the father's education and his ability to use the alder branch to find water. He's more street smart, experiential. He's learned by doing rather than by sitting in a classroom. And finally, in our last body paragraph, we might write about the impossible bridge between the son and the father, the inability of the son or father to respect or appreciate the other. Now, what if you wrote about passing down knowledge? Well, you might break it down into the following 3 points. First, the son, his reaction as a child and adult to his father's attempt to pass down knowledge. For our second point, the father and his attempt to pass down knowledge with the alder branch. Finally, other attempts in the story, like the farmer passing his farm down to his children, or the film, which tries to capture knowledge to pass it to viewers. If you wrote about loss, you might break it down into the following 3 points. First, the son losing his father's skill, the loss of the relationship, the failed father-son relationship, the lost possibility of a good relationship. Finally, was there anything gained? This is something I like to do when I'm writing about a certain theme. I'll think about the opposite of the theme, and that can often become the topic of my third body paragraph in relation to the theme. What about the positives? What was gained? A newfound respect for his father? Now, when you select a theme, you'll have to break it down, as I've shown you, into 3 parts to suit the requirements of a 5-paragraph essay. How do we find these 3 categories? Sometimes they come to you naturally, but here are some suggestions. 1 category per character. Break the theme down by focusing on how 3 different characters embody or react to the central idea. For example, the father, son, and farmer might each represent distinct perspectives or actions related to the theme. You'll notice I did this in maybe all 3 of my breakdowns. I had the son as one of the categories, one of the characters, in other words, as one of the categories. 3 different emotions. Divide the theme by focusing on key emotions that the story explores, such as excitement, indifference, and sadness. Each emotion offers a different angle on the theme, revealing its complexity. Physical, psychological, social. Maybe you can analyze the theme through different dimensions: the physical, events and actions; the psychological, inner thoughts and feelings; and the social, relationships and societal influences. What about personal, familial, societal? Look at how the theme manifests on different levels within the individual, family, and society. How about this one? Desire, obstacle, fulfillment. Look at the progression of the theme in terms of goals, challenges, and outcomes. Now, I should say not all of these templates will map onto the story you've read, but they may lead you in interesting directions. So they may serve as inspiration and lead you to the right categories. Now keep in mind that these three categories must always connect to your chosen theme, right? And now that we've covered the basics, let me give you an example of how to take your analysis to the next level by upgrading your level of observation. When most people analyze a story, they look at the direct meanings of the sentences. Instead of doing that, zoom in on the words themselves, put a magnifying glass up to the text and see what you can squeeze out of individual words, not just sentences. You'll notice, for example, that the father is described as acting with pious care and then religious care when selecting and preparing the older branch. Pious and religious mean the same thing. It's that feeling of reverence and respect that comes over you in a place of worship, like a church. Now, on the subject of religion, look at what the narrator says in conversation with the farmer when he returns to his village. The son says, "Everybody in the village knows each other. No one feels like an outsider." The farmer replies, "You know what's under your feet?" "Hell?" I asked, laughing. It's the son's joke. The narrator makes a joke about hell being under his feet. Now, this may unintentionally trivialize real struggles. For some people, perhaps including the farmer, hell can be a powerful metaphor for suffering, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual. By laughing at the idea of hell being beneath them, it could be perceived as making light of suffering, whether personal or global. We can certainly assume, based on this joke, that the narrator is not a religious person. That's the key point. It's interesting to contrast the son's lack of religious sentiment with the father's spiritual practice of dowsing. The son has not just lost his father's dowsing ability, but also his father's spirituality. The son lives in a secular world without spiritual beliefs. The son has not just failed to learn his father's skill, he has failed to appreciate the whole spiritual dimension of existence. So, by focusing on little words like pious and hell, we've found a new way to understand the story. Here are the three categories. Our theme is the spiritual versus material world. Our first point is the religious world, related to words like pious and religious in the text. A form of divination, the father's dowsing ability, and a ritual, the supernatural event that takes place. Second category will be the secular world, the son's lack of faith, a lack of religious sentiment, the joke he makes. And finally, the son's loss. The son has lost a way of understanding the world. There's no religion in his life. I hope this analysis was useful for you, and I wish you all the best in your own analyses. That's how to find your guiding star.